They laughed at him, mocked his clothes, his job, even his skin. They told him a black janitor had no place in a building meant for important people. They looked at the mop in his hand and assumed it was the only tool he knew how to use. They looked at the uniform and assumed it defined the limits of his existence. What none of them knew was simple, yet devastatingly powerful. He wasn't just allowed to be there. He was the real owner of the entire building. My name is Elias Turner, and for most of my life, people only saw one thing when they looked at me: a black man with a mop. To them, I was part of the background, no different than the potted plants or the vending machines. They never cared about my story. They never imagined there was anything else behind the uniform. They never thought that someone like me could be more than the job I did. But life has a strange, almost poetic sense of irony. Sometimes, the person you step on to get to the top is the very person holding the ladder. To understand why I was there that Thursday morning, you have to understand where I came from. I didn't start in a boardroom. I didn't start with a trust fund. I started on my knees, scrubbing floors, just like the one I was standing on. My mother was a cleaner. For 30 years, she cleaned offices downtown, in buildings where she wasn't allowed to use the main elevators. She taught me everything I know about dignity. She used to tell me, "Elias, there's no shame in honest work. The only shame is in thinking you are better than the person working next to you." She worked until her back gave out, saving every penny, so I could go to school, so I could learn about real estate, finance, and economics. I took those lessons and I built an empire, brick by brick, deal by deal. I have a portfolio that spans 3 states. I have assets that these young executives couldn't even dream of. But I never forgot the smell of bleach. I never forgot the way people looked through my mother, as if she were invisible. So, once a month, I put on the uniform. I pick up the mop. I walk the halls of my own buildings, not as the CEO, Elias Turner, but just as Elias, the janitor. It keeps me grounded. It reminds me of where I came from. And more importantly, it shows me the true character of the people who work for me. You learn a lot about a man by how he treats someone who can do absolutely nothing for him. It happened on a Thursday morning. The lobby was full, buzzing with the chaotic energy of the morning rush. It was a symphony of capitalism, expensive suits rushing in, heels clicking loudly against the polished marble, phones ringing nonstop, the smell of premium coffee and ambition filling the air. I was doing my job, quietly mopping a spill near the main glass entrance. The rhythm of the work was meditative. Dip the mop, wring it out, slide it across the cold stone. I was invisible. People walked around me, stepping over the wet floor sign, without even glancing at my face. That is, until a group of 3 young executives walked by. They were new to the company. I recognized the look. Fresh out of business school, tailored suits that cost more than my mother made in a month, eager to impress each other, desperate to establish their dominance in the corporate food chain. They walked with a swagger that hadn't yet been earned. One of them, a tall man with slick-back hair and a gold watch that caught the light, stopped and pointed at me. He didn't lower his voice. He didn't care who heard. "Look at this guy." He laughed, nudging his friend. "How long before he ruins the marble floor?" The second man, shorter, with a nervous energy, chimed in, eager to please the leader. "Don't worry, man. He probably can't even read the instructions on the bottle. Just hope he doesn't mix the ammonia with the bleach and kill us all." They laughed. It was a cruel, sharp sound that cut through the ambient noise of the lobby. The third man, who seemed to be the ringleader of this little group, shook his head with exaggerated disappointment. He looked at me with eyes full of disdain. "People like him should use the back door," he said, his voice dripping with arrogance. "This place is too classy for a black janitor. It ruins the aesthetic for the clients." The laughter echoed in the lobby. It seemed to hang in the air, heavy and suffocating. People watched. I saw heads turn. I saw the receptionist look up, and then quickly look back down at her computer. I saw the security guard, a man I had hired myself, shift uncomfortably and look away. No one said anything. No one stepped in. The silence of the bystanders was almost as loud as the insults. I kept my head down, focusing on the swirl of the mop on the floor. I didn't say a word. I didn't look up. But inside, Something tightened in my chest. It wasn't just anger. It was a deep, ancient sorrow. Because they weren't just mocking my job. They were mocking my humanity. They were mocking my mother. They were mocking every person who had ever cleaned a floor so that people like them could walk on it without getting their shoes dirty. Minutes later, they came back. They had grabbed coffee from the cafe in the corner and were heading toward the elevators. I thought they would pass me by, having had their fun. But bullies are never satisfied with just one strike. They need to feel the power again. "Hey," the leader snapped. I didn't answer immediately. I continued to work. "I'm talking to you," he said, stepping closer, invading my personal space. "You missed a spot." He kicked a small piece of crumpled paper, a wrapper from his straw, toward me. It landed on the wet floor, right next to my boot. I stopped moving the mop. I slowly crouched down to pick it up. My hands, calloused and strong, grasped the wet paper. "Faster," he said, snapping his fingers near my face. "As long as you're wearing that uniform, you work for us. You do what we say. Now clean it up." That was the moment. That was the breaking point. The air in the lobby seemed to stand still. I could feel the eyes of 50 people on us. I stood up slowly. I didn't hunch my shoulders anymore. I didn't look at the floor. I rose to my full height, which was considerably taller than him. I straightened my back. I looked him directly in the eyes. And I smiled. It wasn't a smile of submission. It wasn't a nervous smile. It was the smile of a predator who knows the trap has already been sprung. I smiled because I knew something they didn't. I knew that in exactly 7 minutes, their entire world would flip upside down. I knew that the power dynamic they thought existed was a complete illusion. I didn't say a word. I just held his gaze. The confidence in his eyes flickered for a second. He wasn't used to the help looking him in the eye. He took a half step back, unnerved by the silence. "What are you looking at?" he muttered, trying to regain his bravado. "Get back to work." Just then, the sound of a heavy engine purring cut through the tension. A sleek, black SUV pulled up to the curb right outside the glass doors. It was the kind of car that commands respect. The driver got out and opened the rear door, and CEO Richard Hale walked in. Richard was a legend in the city. He was the face of the company that occupied the top 10 floors. He was sharp, ruthless in business, but a good man. He was also my business partner, my friend. We had started investing together 20 years ago, and he was the only person in the entire building, besides my lawyers, who knew the truth. He knew that I wasn't just a janitor. He knew that I owned the property they all worked in. Every office, every floor, every piece of marble they were so proud of. I signed the lease agreements. I approved the renovations. I owned the very ground they were standing on. Richard walked right toward us. His stride was purposeful, his eyes locked on the group. The executives straightened up instantly. It was pathetic how quickly their demeanor changed. They went from bullies to sycophants in a heartbeat. They fixed their ties, smoothed their jackets, and put on their best corporate smiles. "Sir, good morning," the leader said, his voice rising an octave. "Welcome, Mr. Hale. We didn't expect to see you down here." "We were just discussing the quarterly projections, sir." The third one lied. Richard didn't look at them. He didn't even acknowledge their existence. He walked straight past them, closing the distance between us. He looked at me, and he smiled. A warm, genuine smile. "Elias," he said, extending his hand. I wiped my hand on my pants and took his. We shook hands firmly, the grip of two equals. "You're right on time," Richard said. The lobby froze. The silence was absolute. You could hear the hum of the air conditioning. The executives blinked in confusion. Their brains couldn't process the image in front of them. The CEO of the company shaking hands with the black janitor? "Right on time," the leader repeated, his voice faint. Richard turned to them, as if noticing them for the first time. He nodded. "Of course," Richard said casually. "We have the strategic planning meeting with the board in 10 minutes. And after that, we need to finalize the paperwork for the building's expansion. I can't make any structural changes without the approval of the owner." Silence. Pure, perfect, suffocating silence. One of the executives laughed nervously. It was a dry, cracking sound. "Oh, there must be a mistake, Mr. Hale. He's the janitor." Richard raised an eyebrow. He looked at me, then back at them. Is that what he told you? I stepped forward. I took off the cap I was wearing and placed it on the cart. No, I said, my voice deep and clear, echoing off the high ceilings. That's what you assumed. Their faces went pale. All the blood drained from their cheeks. The arrogance evaporated, replaced by a dawn of sheer terror. Richard placed a hand on my shoulder. Gentlemen, meet Mr. Elias Turner. He is the primary investor in our firm. And more importantly, he is the owner of this entire building. He owns the land, the structure, and the company you work for rents the space from him. Gasps rippled through the lobby. Whispers broke out like wildfire. Eyes widened. The receptionist stood up behind her desk. The security guard's jaw dropped. One of them stuttered, his hands shaking. You own this place?" I nodded. "Yes. Every inch of it. From the parking garage to the penthouse. Including the marble floor you were so worried about." The leader of the group swallowed hard. I could see his Adam's apple bob. "But you were mopping the floors. You were wearing the uniform." I smiled again, but this time it was cold. I walked closer to him. "I like to walk the building the way my mother taught me," I said softly. "She cleaned floors just like this for 30 years. She raised me on a cleaner's wage. She taught me that dignity isn't in what you wear, but in how you treat people. She used to say, 'Elias, if you ever become successful, never forget how it feels to stand at the bottom.' So I come here. I clean. I remember. And I see. I see who people really are when they think no one important is watching. They looked like their souls had left their bodies. They looked at the floor, unable to meet my gaze. They realized that every insult, every laugh, every cruel word had been heard by the man who held their careers in the palm of his hand. Richard turned to the executives. His face was hard, his eyes disappointed. "I believe you three were just speaking to Mr. Turner," he said. "I walked in just as you were kicking trash at him. Is that correct?" They trembled. They tried to find words, but there were none. "Sir, we didn't know, we thought." "Exactly," I interrupted. "You didn't know. You judged me without knowing anything. You saw a uniform, and you decided I was worth less than you. You saw my skin color, and decided I belonged at the back door. You decided that because I was serving you, I was beneath you." Richard crossed his arms. "In this company, we value integrity. We value respect. We do not tolerate abuse of staff, regardless of their position. And we certainly do not tolerate racism." He paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "You're all suspended," Richard said. "Effective immediately. Hand over your badges to security. We will conduct a full review of your conduct, but I suggest you start updating your resumes. I don't think you'll be working in this building, or any building owned by Mr. Turner, ever again." The lobby watched in shock. The same security guard who had looked away when they were mocking me now stepped forward. He took their badges. He escorted them toward the revolving doors. It was a long walk, a walk of shame. They didn't look back. They just walked out into the street, their careers in ruins, their arrogance shattered against the rock of reality. Poetic justice. When the lobby finally cleared and the whispers died down, Richard looked at me. He sighed and shook his head. "Why do you still do it, Elias?" He asked quietly. "You have millions. You could be on a yacht. You could be in your office. Why the uniform? Why the mop?" I looked down at the floor I had just cleaned. It was shining under the chandelier lights. I thought about my mother. I thought about her cracked hands and her tired back. I thought about all the times she came home crying because someone had treated her like she was nothing. "Because, Richard," I said, looking around the opulent lobby, "money changes people. It builds walls. It blinds you. When I wear this suit, people lie to me. They tell me what I want to hear. They smile because they want something. But when I wear this uniform, I see the truth. I picked up the bucket. Every day, someone shows me who they really are," I said. "And that tells me exactly who deserves to stay in this building and who doesn't." I finished mopping the spot where they had stood. I cleaned away their footprints. And then I handed the mop to the head of maintenance, who had come running over. I adjusted my cuffs, nodded to Richard, and we walked toward the elevator together. As the doors closed, I looked out at the lobby one last time. The receptionist nodded at me with newfound respect. The security guard stood a little straighter. The atmosphere had changed. They realized that in this building, everyone matters. They realized that you never know who you are talking to. And they learned that true power doesn't need to shout, or mock, or belittle. True power is quiet. True power is kind. And sometimes, true power holds a